We're joined by Jennifer Walling from the Illinois Environmental Council to talk about the currently stalled energy bill in Springfield. There have been talks and stalemates and more talks for months now without a lot of progress, I guess. Jen, where are we right now? What's the status and what's preventing this thing from getting done?
Well, I think a lot of folks saw publicly that there was a declaration of an impasse in the negotiations that were between environment and labor. There was a letter from labor and a letter from environmental groups that went out that folks saw. But I think since then, there have been productive discussions. And I think that the legislative leaders need to figure out a way to come to a point where they can pass a bill that labor and environment support. And I'm pretty optimistic about getting something done. And, August 31st is a really important date for solar energy. And we'll see what happens. I mean, I definitely have seen progress in large energy bills happen in a very short period of time before. So this could be one of those.
Explain the August 31st part of this, because I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Yeah, so there is funding that is supposed to go to the solar industry. And we're referring to it as the solar jobs cliff, that the legislature planned to go to the solar industry. And because of basically nobody's fault, it took too long to spend. It took too long to put together the long-term plan. There's about $300 million that's supposed to go to the solar industry for jobs and in some cases already signed projects that would go back to the utilities, back to the ratepayers, and not to the solar projects if the bill isn't moved forward. And that deadline was really June 1st, but it's August 31st is the date that the money's actually moving.
So let's talk about the sticking point, I guess, which would be the forced closure, whether you want to call it that, of coal-fired power plants. Natural gas-fired plants would be later, but coal plants are kind of the big sticking point, especially one that services so much of Southern Illinois. We're still talking 14 years from now, potentially, that these would close. Obviously, in a place like Southern Illinois, where you're job starved in places as it is this a matter of the environmental lobby, the groups saying we are just anti-coal, so you're going to do this no matter what, or is it just a matter of unions saying we can't figure out what to do with these jobs and these industries in the next almost decade and a half?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And I think there are a number of items here when we're looking at, we know coal plants are closing, right? A quarter of Illinois' coal capacity closed at the end of 2019. There have been a couple of new announcements of Waukegan and the, I think, Romeoville plant near Joliet that are closing. And a lot of these coal plants not even closing because of any environmental regulation, closing because they can't compete with natural gas. I think when, and we are anti-coal. We are anti-coal under any circumstances where it might be emitting carbon, and not just anti-coal, but anti-technology that is emitting carbon and emitting other pollutants. And there have been proposals floated to keep Prairie State open until 2045, as long as carbon sequestration is considered. Carbon sequestration, and those are things that we might support. We just want an end date. And I think when you look at Prairie State or the Dahlman plant, right, those were the last coal plants that were built in the state of Illinois. And they were built in a way where they have a captive audience of consumers. They were built after every other coal plant, after every utility, every power company was already making the decision that building new coal plants wasn't going to be competitive, wasn't going to be economical, wasn't going to be something that you could market. they were still built because they had this captive audience. And I think, I actually worked on the campaign to stop Prairie State at the time that it was being built. It was my first job out of law school, was to review a lot of those contracts. And those communities just got such a raw deal, both from this plant that cost nearly 10 times what they said it was going to cost. A lot of these communities are paying 150% of what their neighbors are paying at ComEd. And then, just that we knew that carbon regulation may come along someday. They were told that repeatedly in putting this together, and still made this business decision that, here I am making the government made a poor marketing decision, poor economic decision in choosing to purchase this way after any power company would ever do so. And so this is a plant that it is the seventh largest producer of carbon in the entire United States right now. And for us, this is a plant that needs to have an end date. We need to get off of carbon. We need to not be emitting it anymore. There is a code red emergency for climate in the whole world. And this is something that has to happen as part of an energy package.
It's interesting you talk about sequestration. I remember covering the Future Gen fiasco, in Tuscola and Mattoon for so many years, and that's more than a decade ago, and we still don't have great sequestration options out there, all these years later. I do want to ask about solar and wind specifically, because I think even the capitalists out there are pro solar and wind.
Mm-hmm.
But the concern is, one, it's too expensive, even with the correct me if I'm wrong, 250 million that's being talked about as part of this bill. Is there enough capacity? Can there be enough capacity to pick up the slack of these coal plants that if and when they close?
Absolutely. I think the question is actually about whether, if the nuclear plants closed, if there could actually be that capacity with renewable energy. And I don't think that on that quick of a time period, they could. I do think that with coal and natural gas, it depends on where you are at in the market. I mean, downstate can be up to half coal or natural gas in a given day, but the ComEd territory is only, it's 2/3 to 3/4 nuclear. I definitely know that, and obviously these coal plants and natural gas plants are not going to close tomorrow, but there's absolutely, without any reliability issues and ease of putting wind and solar in the ground in a way that is economical. I mean, any renewable energy facilities being built right now are being built at a cheaper price, even without subsidies, than coal or natural gas plants. Definitely the nuclear. There's only one new nuclear in Georgia that's being built, but definitely there's the ability to do that. I mean, I'm just more concerned with some of the nuclear plants in the short term. If those go offline, you're talking thousands of megawatts really quick. And in that case, we're going to build a lot of new natural gas. So from a carbon perspective, that concerns me, even though we don't think nuclear energy is clean. So for at least the time being, we need to keep those nuclear plants open and operating. And we're going to have to get to the point where we deal with the 1,000-year environmental pollutant that is within those facilities. But right now, carbon and the climate crisis are a top priority.
Are Exelon's threats, you can maybe even call them more than threats, because they're filing all the necessary paperwork with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Are the fears of closures or shutdowns in Byron and at Dresden, are they making this negotiation more complicated or more important, like forcing everybody to the table?
That's a great question. I do think that there are a lot of political forces that Exelon does bring to the table, because this is an urgent situation. And I think it is an interesting balance in all of this, because I know from the Future Energy Jobs Act that when Exelon tried to come with just their nuclear and just that portion, they didn't have enough votes. And so it really does need to be an energy package, and it really does need to be Exelon. It needs to be labor. It needs to be environmental groups to have that majority. There's really not another clean energy coalition that can get anything done. But it would be, if those plants go offline, if the solar rollover cliff happens, if all of these political urgencies take place, it will be a real Wild West of energy policy within Illinois. I don't know what would happen after that. And I'd love to think that we've moved the General Assembly in such a way that folks understand and know that the climate crisis is happening, and it's caused by our emissions, and we have to do something about it. But I don't know if we pass some of those dates and things start to happen, what happens in Illinois?
You know me, I've worked in Republican circles. I'm from
Mhm.
a small town, rural community downstate. And if I went back there and I asked folks, what do you think of the environmental folks, and, and their concerns about, climate change and carbon emissions, et cetera. And they would scoff. They would say, they think cows fart too much, and they want everybody to drive a Prius, and they don't care how much it costs when we turn on the light switch. Why, maybe explain this, if you could, for the middle of the road folks, not the I hate the hippies and I hate the coal guys. I mean, because 99% of us fall in the middle. So why does this matter so much to Joe Blow out there?
Sure. Well, I do think, despite the everyday small talk conversations that we have about the weather with one another, no matter where we are in the state, I think that there is widespread recognition that the weather's different. And I know, in talking with different farmers, just pure Farm Bureau members, in the last decade, it really has gone from nothing's happening to like something weird is happening. And talking about, not this year, last year, but the 2 years before that were just such severe flooding that happened within the state. And, I actually know a bunch of farmers that went organic because the third year is what you have to do. And they had 2 years of couldn't plant their crops. And so I think that discussion about the extreme weather events that are happening within the state, the increased flooding, et cetera, are the things that affect average everyday Illinoisans. And when we think about, where our municipalities are, for example, our municipalities cannot afford the pressures that extreme weather events are going to bring to small town America. If your bridge gets wiped out, is the state or feds, are they going to be there for you to fix this bridge that may be only in and out access? I was just down in Calhoun County that you have to take a ferry to. And so, that sort of infrastructure is definitely a challenge. But, to be honest, when I talk with the Republicans that support our policies, I'm not talking about climate change, because I'm often talking about good economic policy with a number of these items, because we, for so long, the concept of economic diversification, making sure that we're not having all of our eggs in one basket as a short-term policy, is really important. Folks are seeing the jobs that are coming from this. I mean, we've reduced jobs because of the pandemic, but the latest Clean Jobs Midwest report has us at 115,000 clean energy jobs in Illinois, which is more than the real estate and accounting sector combined. 80% of those jobs are in energy efficiency, and that didn't really reduce during any of this. And we were at more than 125,000 before the pandemic. So it is a sector that's growing. So I think that, just in all throughout Illinois, there are folks that are seeing the economic and jobs benefits, and things like energy efficiency. You cannot take a home and move it to China and then have somebody do an audit there. The audit has to happen in the United States by somebody who's here in Illinois. And so all of those different things are bringing jobs and opportunity, bringing broadband with it in certain areas. I think I talked to lots of communities, Henry County, Illinois, just outside Quad Cities. Wind has saved their school districts. They were at the point of consolidation and closure, and wind is bringing in a huge percentage of property taxes to make sure that their schools can stay open and well funded.
Before we let you go,
Sure.
what's your optimism on getting an energy bill done at this point? Are you optimistic? Do you feel good? Do you think this will get done before there's a nuclear or a solar, cliff in that sense?
Yeah. I think the next 2 weeks are going to be really critical. I'm pretty optimistic right now. If we're getting closer to August 30th and 31st, then I'm going to be less optimistic. I think that that's something that ends up going into veto session, and we end up with some different realities with the energy sector if we're heading into October. But I've heard a lot of things that make me very positive that we can reach a resolution, and one that the environmental community and climate champions are going to support.
Jen Walling from the Illinois Environmental Council. Jen, thanks for the time.
Thank you.